In this video, we explore Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire, 2024, breaking down its story, plot, characters, production details, box office performance, and overall impact. Let's begin with the story, and yes, spoiler alert. The film opens deep within the Hollow Earth, where Kong is shown surviving in a harsh and hostile environment, battling strange creatures and relying on strength and instinct to stay alive. In one intense sequence, he outsmarts a group of beasts and escapes by luring them into a deadly trap, but even in victory, he is reminded of his struggle when an infected tooth prevents him from eating. This small but painful detail reflects a larger truth: despite his power, Kong is still alone and vulnerable. On the surface, Monarch scientists, led by Dr. Eileen Andrews, continue monitoring both Kong and Godzilla, working to keep them separated and maintain balance. Godzilla, acting as a force of nature, hunts down threats across the world, including a destructive titan in Rome, where he reasserts dominance before retreating to rest. Meanwhile, strange energy signals begin emerging from the Hollow Earth, triggering massive disturbances and drawing attention from Monarch. These signals also connect to Jia, who begins experiencing visions and drawing symbols tied to something ancient, suggesting a deeper link between humanity and the Titans. As the signals intensify, a Monarch outpost in Hollow Earth is suddenly destroyed by an unknown force. Sensing danger, Andrews teams up with Bernie and a Titan veterinarian known as Trapper, while Kong himself returns to the surface seeking help for his injury. After receiving a mechanical tooth replacement, Kong leads the team back into Hollow Earth, where the mystery deepens. At the same time, Godzilla senses the growing threat and begins absorbing massive amounts of radiation, preparing himself for an approaching conflict. Back in the depths, Kong discovers that he is not alone. He encounters a hidden civilization of apes led by the ruthless Scar King, a tyrant who rules through fear and commands an army. Among them is a smaller ape, Zuko, who initially acts against Kong but later becomes an uneasy companion. As Kong navigates this dangerous new world, he faces both brutal combat and moments of unexpected connection, revealing a deeper emotional layer to his journey. Meanwhile, the human team uncovers ancient ruins and hidden pathways that reveal the long-buried history of these titans, including connections to powerful forces that threaten both the Hollow Earth and the surface. Their journey is filled with danger, from deadly creatures to collapsing terrain, reinforcing that this hidden world is as alive as it is dangerous. As the threat grows, it becomes clear that Scar King is preparing for war, using his control over a powerful ice titan, Shimo, to expand his dominance beyond Hollow Earth. This looming danger forces a turning point. Godzilla and Kong must once again face each other, but this time, not as enemies. Instead, they are pushed toward an uneasy alliance, recognizing that survival depends on cooperation. The story builds toward a massive confrontation where strength, strategy, and identity collide. Kong must confront his own kind and decide what kind of leader he will become, while Godzilla evolves into a more powerful force to restore balance. In the end, the battle is not just about defeating a villain, but about protecting both worlds from collapse. As the danger grows, Godzilla tracks another powerful titan in the Arctic and confronts it in a brutal underwater battle. Despite being wrapped and restrained, Godzilla overpowers the creature, kills it, and absorbs its radiation, evolving into a more powerful form as his energy begins to glow with a bright, intense pink. This transformation signals that something far greater is coming. Meanwhile, deep in the Hollow Earth, the human team is discovered by the Iwi tribe, an ancient civilization that has lived alongside the Titans for generations. They immediately recognize Jia as one of their own. Through a telepathic connection with the tribe's leader, Jia experiences visions that reveal the past, showing that long ago, the great apes were protectors of humanity. However, everything changed when a ruthless ruler known as the Scar King led an army of apes in an attempt to conquer the surface. This triggered a massive war with Godzilla and his kind, until the powerful Titan Mothra intervened and helped imprison the Scar King and his army deep within the Hollow Earth. The tribe believes that Jia is connected to this ancient legacy and may play a key role in restoring balance. At the same time, Kong follows Zuko into the territory of the Ape Empire and is shocked to find his own kind enslaved, forced into labor under the rule of the Scar King. When Kong steps in to defend another ape, he quickly draws attention. The Scar King appears, mocking Kong and asserting dominance. Their confrontation escalates into a fierce battle, where Kong nearly overpowers him. However, the Scar King reveals his greatest weapon, Shimo, a massive ice titan capable of unleashing devastating freezing power. Controlled through a painful crystal, Shimo attacks Kong, freezing his arm and leaving him severely weakened. Forced to retreat, Kong barely escapes, using his intelligence to trap and eliminate pursuing enemies. Back with the Iwi, the humans learn more about the ancient prophecy while Jiao begins to embrace her connection to the Titans. When Kong is brought back injured and defeated, it becomes clear he cannot face this threat alone. Trapper uses experimental monarch technology to create a powerful mechanical glove, restoring strength to Kong's damaged arm. With renewed determination, Kong makes a bold decision: he must seek out Godzilla. Kong emerges onto the surface in Egypt, calling out to Godzilla. When Godzilla arrives, he does not see an ally, only a rival. The two titans clash once again in a massive battle that tears through pyramids and desert landscapes. Kong tries to communicate and signal that a greater threat is coming, but Godzilla initially refuses to listen. It is only when Mothra reappears, brought back through Jia's connection and the Iwi ritual, that everything changes. Godzilla recognizes her presence and finally understands the situation. At last, Godzilla and Kong unite. As the Scar King rises from the hollow earth with his army and Shimo, the final battle begins. The humans attempt to stop the invasion by using ancient technology to create a gravitational disruption, slowing the Titans' escape. Meanwhile, Godzilla and Kong face the enemy head-on in a massive, destructive war. Kong uses strength, strategy, and his new weapon, while Godzilla unleashes his evolved power. Together, they challenge the Scar King and break his control over Shimo, turning the tide of the battle. In the end, the Scar King is defeated, his empire destroyed, and balance is restored once again. Kong not only survives but finds purpose, no longer alone, now a leader among his kind. Godzilla returns to his role as the protector of natural balance, and the connection between humans and Titans grows stronger through Jia. Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire, 2024, reaches its peak in a massive, high-energy finale where Godzilla and Kong finally unite against the rising threat of the Scar King and his army. As the battle intensifies, both Titans charge into combat together, leaping into a chaotic clash against the Scar King and the Ice Titan Shimo. The fight quickly escalates across dimensions and breaks into the surface world, landing in Rio de Janeiro, where the city becomes the stage for total destruction. The Scar King commands Shimo to unleash devastating ice attacks, freezing buildings and overwhelming Kong, while Godzilla counters with his evolved atomic power. In the middle of the chaos, the key to victory emerges when the crystal controlling Shimo is destroyed, freeing her from the Scar King's control. Turning against her former master, Shimo helps shift the balance of the fight. With their enemy weakened, Godzilla and Kong combine their strength in a final coordinated assault, leading to the Scar King's defeat as he is frozen and shattered. After the battle, order is restored as Godzilla returns to his role as the guardian of balance, retreating once again to rest. In the Hollow Earth, the ancient Iwi civilization begins to rebuild, and Jia embraces her connection to both worlds while choosing to remain with Dr. Andrews. Kong, no longer alone, returns to the ape civilization where he is finally accepted as a leader. Surrounded by his kind, along with Zuko and the now freed Shimo, Kong rises into his new role with strength and purpose, marking the end of his journey from isolation to belonging. The film also features a strong supporting cast that helps ground the story, including Rebecca Hall as Dr. Eileen Andrews, who serves as the emotional center, Kaylee Hottle as Jia, whose connection to the Titans plays a crucial role, Dan Stevens as the energetic Titan veterinarian Trapper, and Brian Tyree Henry as Bernie, who adds both humor and insight. Directed by Adam Wingard, the film focuses heavily on large-scale action, visual spectacle, and expanding the Hollow Earth mythology. It performed well at the box office, continuing the success of the MonsterVerse and proving strong audience interest in Titan-driven stories. Overall, the movie delivers an action-packed experience centered on unity, power, and identity, with Kong's emotional growth standing out as the heart of the story while Godzilla reinforces his role as the ultimate force of balance. Dan Stevens is an English actor who grew up in Wales and southeast England, developing an interest in acting from a young age. Now in his early 40s and standing around 6 feet tall, he has built a strong and versatile career in film and television. In 2009, he married South African jazz singer Susie Harriott, and the couple has 3 children together. Stevens began his professional acting career in the early 2000s, but his breakthrough came when he was cast as Matthew Crawley in the critically acclaimed television series Downton Abbey. The show became a global success, and his portrayal of the charming and noble character earned him widespread recognition. Following this success, he expanded into a variety of roles, including the thriller The Guest, where he played a mysterious and charismatic ex-soldier, showcasing his range as an. In 2017, he gained further fame by starring as the Beast in Disney's live-action Beauty and the Beast, delivering a performance that combined emotion and depth, solidifying his place in the industry. Kaylee Hottle is a young American actress best known for her role as Jiao in Godzilla vs. Kong, 2021, a role she reprised in Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire, 2024. She is deaf and fluent in American Sign Language, which adds authenticity and emotional depth to her performances. Before her film success, she appeared in commercials such as Glide App in 2016 and a Mother's Day campaign in 2017. She also had a small television appearance in Magnum P.I. in 2021. Outside of acting, she enjoys track and field, seafood, and spending time at the beach, bringing a natural and relatable presence to her role. Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire performed strongly at the global box office, earning over $560 million worldwide. It grossed around $194 million in the United States and Canada, with an additional $366 million internationally, bringing its total close to the franchise's highest earners. The film opened in theaters on March 29 with a powerful debut of about $80 million domestically and continued to perform well in the following weeks. It was later released on digital platforms on May 24, allowing audiences to watch it at home while still maintaining momentum in theaters. Its success places it among the top entries in the MonsterVerse, surpassing films like Godzilla, King of the Monsters and Godzilla vs. Kong, and approaching the lifetime total of Kong, Skull Island. Despite mixed reviews from critics, the film has been widely appreciated by audiences for its large-scale action and visual spectacle. Some critics described it as heavily focused on action with less emphasis on deep storytelling, but for many viewers, that is exactly what makes it enjoyable. The movie delivers non-stop energy, massive battles, and impressive visual effects, especially in IMAX, where the experience feels intense and immersive. While the narrative may not always be tightly structured, the film succeeds in entertaining its target audience by embracing spectacle over complexity. A sequel is already in development, with screenwriter Dave Callaham attached to the project, though it remains unclear whether director Adam Wingard will return. The ending of the film leaves room for future stories, suggesting that the MonsterVerse will continue to expand. Overall, Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire stands as a strong entry in the franchise, offering a visually exciting and action-driven experience that appeals to fans of large-scale cinematic battles and monster-driven storytelling. Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire clearly understands its audience, especially longtime fans who are deeply familiar with Titan lore and the MonsterVerse mythology. The film leans heavily into established ideas like Alpha Titans, ancient signals, and energy disturbances, but at times it feels like a missed opportunity to evolve beyond these familiar concepts. Instead of allowing characters to grow and recognize patterns from past events, the story often resets them into confusion, which can weaken their credibility. The dynamic between Godzilla and Kong is established early, with an understanding that both rule their own domains, yet conflict is always close beneath the surface. Kong takes center stage in this film, portrayed in a more emotional and vulnerable light. He shows signs of aging, loneliness, and a deep desire for connection, making him one of the most relatable elements of the story. His journey, along with his interactions with other apes, carries much of the emotional weight, often more effectively than the human storyline. Dr. Eileen Andrews, played by Rebecca Hall, shifts from a strong, independent figure into more of a maternal character focused on Jia, which adds emotional depth but also limits her presence as a central force in the narrative. Jia remains important, especially with her connection to the Titans, but much of the human story feels overshadowed by the scale of the monster action. New character Trapper, played by Dan Stevens, brings energy and purpose, yet at times the human characters mainly serve to explain the plot rather than drive it. Emotional moments are present, but they are often rushed or overshadowed by the constant movement of the story. Visually, the film is impressive and packed with spectacle. From glowing energy forms to massive ice and fire effects, it delivers a sensory overload that works especially well on large screens. The Hollow Earth is expanded further than before, presenting a world filled with ancient civilizations, advanced technology, and strange ecosystems. However, the film introduces so many elements and locations so quickly that few of them leave a lasting impact. The pacing prioritizes non-stop action over depth, moving rapidly from one set piece to another without allowing the story to fully breathe. In the end, Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire succeeds as a visually exciting and action-driven blockbuster, but it sometimes sacrifices storytelling and character development for spectacle. It offers thrilling moments and expands the monsterverse in scale, yet the lack of balance between emotion, narrative, and action prevents it from reaching its full potential. Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire is a film that clearly pulls inspiration from many familiar blending elements that feel reminiscent of Jurassic Park, Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, and even Guardians of the Galaxy. The Hollow Earth is presented as a vast and dangerous world, almost like a fantasy battlefield, while the Scar King emerges as a ruthless and visually striking villain. He is portrayed as a brutal ruler who enslaves other apes and controls the powerful Titan Shimo, turning the Hollow Earth into a harsh and oppressive environment. His presence adds a stronger sense of threat compared to previous villains, especially with his dominance, weaponized whip, and command over other Titans. Alongside this, Godzilla's evolved pink form and Kong's upgraded mechanical glove bring a fresh visual edge to the action, leading to an exciting and large-scale final battle that fully delivers on monster versus monster spectacle. However, while the action is impressive, the film struggles with balance. The non-stop pace leaves little room for deeper storytelling or emotional development, and many of the human characters feel pushed aside or underused. The movie focuses heavily on visual excitement, offering intense battles and creative environments, but often sacrifices clarity and narrative depth in the process. Director Adam Wingard clearly prioritizes spectacle, using bold colors, large-scale destruction, and dynamic camera work to create a visually engaging experience, especially on the big screen. At its core, the film works best when it embraces what it is, a fast-paced, action-driven monster movie. If not overanalyzed, it becomes an entertaining and thrilling ride filled with massive fights and impressive visuals. However, when compared to more thoughtful entries like Godzilla -1, which explored deeper themes and emotional storytelling, The New Empire feels more surface level. It delivers excitement and scale, but lacks the deeper meaning and narrative strength that could have elevated it further. In the end, Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire is a visually powerful but story-light blockbuster. It succeeds in giving fans the epic Titan battles they expect, but falls short in creating a truly memorable or meaningful narrative experience. Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire presents a split narrative where Kong rules within the Hollow Earth while Godzilla remains above ground, protecting the surface from dangerous Titans. The story begins to take shape when Monarch detects a mysterious signal coming from deep within the Hollow Earth, suggesting a new and potentially greater threat. At the same time, Jia, the last survivor of the Skull Island tribe and adopted daughter of Dr. Eileen Andrews, begins experiencing visions that seem connected to this signal. As the plot unfolds, it divides into two parallel paths. Kong is drawn into a deeper, unknown region of the Hollow Earth, where he discovers a hidden world and a tribe of apes similar to himself, while Andrews, Bernie, and Trapper travel into the Hollow Earth to investigate the disturbance. Interestingly, despite the title, Godzilla plays a more limited role for much of the film, appearing mainly during key moments and the final battle, while Kong remains the central focus throughout. Much of the film's strength lies in Kong's storyline, which is emotional, engaging, and filled with creative action. His intelligence, adaptability, and physicality are highlighted in several moments, from using the environment to his advantage to receiving a powerful mechanical arm upgrade. However, the human storyline often feels less impactful. Despite a talented cast, many of the human characters are given weak or overly functional dialogue, serving more to explain the plot than to drive it. Even performances that should stand out are held back by writing that struggles to create meaningful emotional connections. The film also shifts away from the rivalry that defined Godzilla vs. Kong, choosing instead to unite the Titans more quickly. While this creates a large-scale team-up, it removes some of the tension and excitement that came from their conflict. Kong's arc feels more complete and developed, showing growth and purpose, but Godzilla's role feels reduced, almost like a secondary presence rather than a fully explored character. There are moments of potential, especially with his evolved form and dominance, but they are not explored deeply enough. Another issue lies in the film's scale and visual storytelling. While the Hollow Earth is imaginative and visually impressive, the lack of consistent visual context sometimes makes it difficult to fully grasp the scale of the Titans and their environment. The film introduces many ideas, locations, and creatures, but moves through them so quickly that few have time to leave a lasting impression. Overall, Godzilla x Kong, the New Empire delivers strong action, creative visuals, and a compelling arc for Kong, but struggles with underdeveloped human characters, uneven pacing, and a reduced role for Godzilla. While it remains entertaining and visually exciting, it does not fully balance its elements, making it feel like a film with great potential that is only partially realized. One of the noticeable issues in Godzilla x Kong, the New Empire, is how scale is sometimes handled. Many of the creatures in the Hollow Earth appear almost like normal apes until they are placed next to buildings or humans, which makes their true size harder to appreciate during large portions of the film. Because much of the action takes place in the Hollow Earth, the middle section can feel visually smaller despite the massive stakes. Thankfully, the final battle shifts to the surface, delivering a more satisfying sense of scale and destruction. While it may not reach the same level as the climax of Godzilla, King of the Monsters, it is still exciting and fun to watch, especially seeing the Titans fully unleashed in a recognizable environment. Overall, the film works best as a straightforward, entertaining blockbuster. It may not be as strong as some of its predecessors, but it still delivers what fans expect: giant monster battles, impressive visuals, and fast-paced action. Its shorter runtime also works in its favor, offering a quick and engaging experience without feeling overly stretched. The visual effects are strong, especially in the action sequences, and Kong's facial expressions stand out as one of the most impressive elements, adding emotion and personality to a largely CGI-driven character. The fight scenes are creative and energetic, often resembling larger-than-life wrestling matches between titans, which makes them highly enjoyable to watch. The Scar King serves as a solid antagonist, bringing a more structured threat, although his final confrontation feels somewhat rushed and could have been developed further. On the other hand, the human characters continue to be one of the weaker aspects of the film. While not completely ineffective, they often repeat familiar reactions and contribute little beyond moving the plot forward, making their presence feel less impactful compared to the Titans. Despite these flaws, the film succeeds as a fun and visually engaging experience. It knows exactly what it is and does not try to be overly complex. For viewers looking for deep storytelling, it may fall short, but for those who want pure entertainment and large-scale monster action, it delivers. The movie performed well at the box office and continues the momentum of the MonsterVerse, proving that audiences are still eager to watch these iconic titans on the big screen. In the end, Godzilla x Kong, the New Empire stands as an enjoyable popcorn film that prioritizes spectacle and excitement over depth, making it a satisfying watch for fans of the genre. In Godzilla x Kong, the New Empire, the story unfolds across both the surface world and the Hollow Earth, where Godzilla continues to maintain balance by hunting dangerous titans that threaten humanity, including a destructive creature in Rome before settling again in the Colosseum. Meanwhile, a mysterious signal is detected by a monarch outpost in the Hollow Earth, triggering strange visions in Jia, the last survivor of the Skull Island Iwi tribe and the adopted daughter of Dr. Eileen Andrews. Concerned about these visions, Andrews begins investigating, while Godzilla also senses the disturbance and begins absorbing radiation from a nuclear facility in France to prepare for an approaching threat. At the same time, Kong discovers a hidden region deep within the Hollow Earth, where he encounters a tribe of apes, including a young one named Suko. However, this civilization is ruled by the ruthless Scar King, who controls a powerful ice titan named Shimo through a crystal. During a brutal encounter, Shimo severely injures Kong's arm with her freezing breath, forcing him to retreat. As the human team ventures deeper into the Hollow Earth, they discover an ancient temple housing the surviving Iwi tribe, who communicate telepathically and reveal that the signal is a distress call. Through visions, they learn that the Scar King once attempted to conquer the surface world and wage war against Godzilla's kind, but was defeated and imprisoned deep within the Hollow Earth. A prophecy also reveals that Jia has the power to awaken Mothra, a key force in restoring balance. Meanwhile, Kong is aided by Trapper, who equips him with a mechanical arm brace to restore his strength. Realizing the scale of the threat, Kong seeks out Godzilla, leading to a powerful confrontation between the two in Egypt, which is ultimately interrupted by Mothra's return, bringing them together as allies. The final battle erupts as the Scar King leads his army toward the surface, with Godzilla, Kong, and Mothra joining forces to stop him. The conflict reaches its climax in Rio de Janeiro, where massive destruction unfolds. The key turning point comes when the crystal controlling Shimo is destroyed, freeing her from the Scar King's control. She then turns against him, helping Godzilla and Kong defeat the tyrant once and for all. After the battle, peace is restored. Godzilla returns to rest, Kong leads the apes in the Hollow Earth alongside Suko and Shimo, and Jia chooses to remain with Dr. Andrews, affirming their bond as family. The film received mixed reviews from critics, with some noting that while the action and visuals are impressive, the story lacks depth. However, audiences responded much more positively, praising the film for its entertainment value, large-scale battles, and thrilling spectacle, making it a successful and enjoyable addition to the MonsterVerse. The production of Godzilla x Kong, the new empire involved a large and highly coordinated international team, reflecting the massive scale of the film. The project was led by director Adam Wingard, who also served as an executive producer, alongside key producers including Mary Parent, Brian Rogers, Thomas Tull, and Eric McLeod, with additional executive producers such as Dan Lin, Roy Lee, and others contributing to the film's development. The production team was supported by multiple line producers and co-producers from different regions, including Morocco, Italy, Iceland, and Brazil, highlighting the global nature of the project and its extensive logistical requirements. This collaborative structure allowed the film to manage complex shooting environments, large-scale visual effects, and multiple production units across various locations. The makeup and prosthetics department played a crucial role in enhancing the realism of human characters and supporting the visual storytelling. Led by experienced department heads and prosthetic designers, the team included numerous artists, assistants, and specialists responsible for hairstyling, makeup application, and special effects work. Their contribution ensured consistency in character appearance while also supporting the integration of CGI elements with practical effects. The department's work, although less visible compared to the Titans, added an important layer of detail to the overall production quality. The sound department was equally extensive, featuring supervising sound editors, re-recording mixers, ADR specialists, Foley artists, and sound designers who worked together to create the immersive audio experience of the film. From the thunderous roars of the Titans to the destruction of cities and subtle environmental effects, the sound team was responsible for building a layered and dynamic soundscape that enhanced the scale and intensity of the action. Their work was essential in bringing the world of the MonsterVerse to life, especially during large battle sequences. In addition, the animation and visual effects teams formed the backbone of the film's production. A large group of animators, technical directors, and 3D artists worked on creating the Titans, their movements, and the environments of the Hollow Earth. Senior animators and layout artists collaborated to ensure that each creature felt powerful, realistic, and emotionally expressive, particularly in Kong's case, where facial animation played a key role. The art department further supported the film with concept designers, storyboard artists, prop makers, and set designers who developed the visual identity of both the surface world and the hollow Earth. Their work included designing environments, constructing props, and planning action sequences, ensuring that every visual element aligned with the film's epic scale. Overall, the production of Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire demonstrates a massive collaborative effort across multiple departments and countries. From direction and production management to sound design, animation, and art direction, every team contributed to creating a visually rich and technically complex film that continues to expand the scope of the MonsterVerse. The production of Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire extended across an even broader network of crew members and departments, reflecting the massive scale and complexity of the film. In addition to the core production team, a large supporting crew handled areas such as art coordination, set construction, digital asset management, legal services, and production logistics. Specialists worked on everything from prop design, storyboard development, and concept art to carpentry, steel structures, and set decoration, ensuring that both practical and digital environments were fully realized. The additional crew also included production coordinators, accountants, safety supervisors, assistants, and cultural consultants who helped maintain organization and authenticity across international filming locations. Roles such as ASL coaches and interpreters supported inclusive storytelling, particularly for Gia's character, while post-production supervisors and videographic teams ensured smooth workflow from filming to final output. The scale of collaboration highlights how modern blockbuster filmmaking relies on hundreds of contributors working behind the scenes, each playing a specific role in bringing the vision to life. From managing finances and logistics to designing visual assets and supporting actors on set, every department contributed to the final product. This extensive teamwork allowed the film to deliver its large-scale action, detailed environments, and polished presentation, reinforcing its place as a major entry in the MonsterVerse. At the same time, the film continues to spark discussion among fans, including theories about future storylines, such as the possibility of introducing classic villains like Space Godzilla, suggesting that the franchise still has room to expand and evolve in future installments. The idea that Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire could be setting up Space Godzilla has been widely discussed among fans, especially those familiar with classic Godzilla lore. Space Godzilla, introduced in the 1990s, is known as one of Godzilla's strongest and most dangerous enemies, a creature created from Godzilla's DNA that was mutated through cosmic forces such as a black hole. Because of his unique origin, power level, and distinct design, many believed the MonsterVerse might eventually build toward his introduction. Earlier hints seem to support this theory, particularly in the novelization of Godzilla vs. Kong, which mentioned an ancient being called Zahalawa, described as a monster that ate a star and battled Kong's species in the hollow Earth. This description led to speculation that Zahalawa could actually be Space Godzilla, especially since the idea of consuming a star fits with a cosmic origin. However, Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire appears to move away from that interpretation and instead reframes Zahalawa as Godzilla himself. The film expands the ancient Titan history and clearly places Godzilla at the center of the war against the Scar King, suggesting that he, not a separate cosmic entity, was responsible for those events. Visual elements and lore details shown in the film align with Godzilla's familiar appearance rather than anything resembling Space Godzilla, which weakens the earlier theory. In addition, the role of Mothra in sealing away the Scar King reinforces that the key players in this ancient conflict were already established Titans, not an unknown outsider from space. This shift grounds the story more firmly within the existing MonsterVerse continuity. The phrase describing Godzilla as a creature that ate a star now seems more symbolic than literal. Rather than pointing to a cosmic transformation, it may refer to his connection with powerful energy, particularly the hollow Earth energy that has been shown to fuel his abilities. It is possible that at some point in the distant past, Godzilla absorbed or harnessed a massive energy that enhanced his atomic power, which could have been interpreted by ancient civilizations as consuming a star. This interpretation keeps the mythology consistent while still leaving room for mystery around Godzilla's origins and evolution. Even though this film reduces the likelihood of Space Godzilla being directly connected to Zahalawa, it does not completely remove the possibility of his appearance in the future. The monsterverse continues to expand, and there are still opportunities to introduce new threats, including cosmic ones. Future projects, such as those connected to Monarch, Legacy of Monsters, could provide a pathway for introducing Space Godzilla in a different way. For now, the new empire chooses to deepen Godzilla's existing mythology rather than expand into a cosmic storyline, leaving Space Godzilla as a potential but not yet realized addition to the franchise. It has been suggested that the energy from the hollow Earth is similar to the kind of energy found in pulsars and supermassive black holes, which opens up an interesting possibility for introducing Space Godzilla into the monsterverse. By linking hollow Earth energy to black hole-like properties, the story creates a pathway that could naturally explain the existence of a cosmic variant of Godzilla without needing to send his DNA into outer space like in the original Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla. Since the hollow Earth already sits at the center of the monsterverse, using it as the origin point for a new version of Space Godzilla would feel more grounded within the established lore. One possible direction for a sequel could be that a member of Godzilla's species was exposed to the unstable energy within a hollow Earth rift, causing a mutation that leads to the creation of Space Godzilla. This version could already exist somewhere within the monsterverse, slowly growing stronger and preparing for a future confrontation with Godzilla and Kong. Following Godzilla x Kong, the new empire, the idea of expanding the Titan roster becomes even more exciting, especially when considering returning characters like Rodan. After his appearance in Godzilla, King of the Monsters, there was strong expectation that he would return, and although that has not yet happened, the ending of the new empire opens the door for new alliances. With Kong now connected to Shimo and Godzilla linked to Mothra, the next film could build toward larger team-based battles. If future sequels aim to raise the stakes, adding more Titans to each side would be a natural progression. This is where Rodan becomes a strong candidate for a return, especially as a counterpart to Shimo. Shimo represents ice, while Rodan represents fire, creating a natural contrast that could add balance and visual excitement to future battles. If Kong continues to fight alongside Shimo, then Godzilla having Rodan as an ally would create a more even dynamic. Rodan's aerial abilities and fiery power would bring something different to the battlefield, complementing Godzilla's strength in a way that expands the scale of combat. This kind of setup could lead to a more strategic and visually dynamic Titan conflict, where different abilities and elements come into play. Overall, while Space Godzilla has not yet been introduced, the monsterverse now has the foundation to do so in a way that fits its existing world. At the same time, the potential return of Titans like Rodan could help build toward larger, more balanced team battles. With the groundwork already established in the new empire, the future of the monsterverse has multiple directions it can take, each offering the chance to expand both its mythology and its scale. If another Godzilla and Kong rematch or team-up happens in a future sequel, bringing Rodan into the story could create the perfect setup for a powerful Titan quartet. One of the reasons Godzilla and Kong work so well together is because of how different they are. Godzilla represents pure, overwhelming power, while Kong relies more on intelligence, agility, and adaptability. This contrast makes them a balanced and dangerous team, and the same idea could easily extend to Rodan and Shimo. Rodan, with his fiery abilities and aerial dominance, would act as a natural counterpart to Shimo, whose ice-based powers bring a completely different kind of threat. Together, these four Titans would represent a mix of fire and ice, strength and strategy, creating incredible potential for visually stunning and dynamic battle sequences. The idea of these four Titans fighting together is especially exciting because each one brings a unique style of combat. Godzilla's atomic power, Kong's physical combat skills, Rodan's speed and fire, and Shimo's freezing abilities could combine to create a level of action never seen before in the monsterverse. This kind of combination would not only raise the stakes but also make the final battle feel more strategic and layered, rather than just raw destruction. While seeing Godzilla, Kong, and Mothra team up in the new empire was already a major moment, adding Rodan and Shimo into the mix could take that experience even further. It is hard to imagine a stronger group of heroic Titans working together on screen. There is also a logical way to bring Rodan back into the story. After the events of Godzilla, king of the monsters, Rodan was last seen retreating to a volcanic environment, likely remaining inactive. However, if a future threat becomes too powerful for Godzilla to handle alone, it would make sense for him to call upon Rodan, especially since Rodan has already recognized Godzilla as the Alpha Titan. This would allow Rodan to return naturally and join forces with Godzilla, Kong, and Shimo in a future conflict. For longtime fans, this idea carries even more weight. Rodan has historically teamed up with Godzilla in several classic films, making him one of Godzilla's most consistent allies. His limited role in the MonsterVerse so far has felt like a missed opportunity, especially given his importance in earlier stories. Bringing him back as a key ally would not only honor that legacy but also finally give him the meaningful role he deserves. Overall, the potential of a four-Titan alliance featuring Godzilla, Kong, Rodan, and Shimo offers an exciting direction for the future of the MonsterVerse, combining classic elements with new possibilities in a way that could deliver one of the most thrilling battles in the franchise. This idea could be taken even further if a future film pairs Godzilla with Rodan as a true tag team, allowing them to fight together in a more coordinated and strategic way. Such a partnership could even pay homage to classic team-up attacks seen in older Godzilla films, where multiple Titans combine their abilities against a common enemy. After seeing the teamwork between Godzilla and Kong in the New Empire, there is strong potential for the MonsterVerse to explore similar dynamics with other Titans. At the same time, the film also gives deeper insight into Godzilla's actions, particularly why he killed Tiamat before confronting the Scar King. While it may have seemed like an unnecessary act at first, Godzilla had clear reasons for targeting her. As the Alpha Titan, his role is to maintain balance among all Titans, eliminating those that threaten the natural order. Tiamat had already been classified by Monarch as a highly aggressive and destructive Titan, making her a long-standing concern. Their conflict was not new, as Godzilla and Tiamat had clashed before. In earlier encounters, Tiamat had proven dangerous, using toxic abilities and aggressive tactics, and although she had previously submitted to Godzilla, their rivalry remained unresolved. In the New Empire, Godzilla seeks her out not just out of dominance, but for strategic reasons. Her territory, located in a highly concentrated energy region, contained a powerful of radiation. This energy was essential for Godzilla to prepare for the larger threat that was coming. By defeating Tiamat, Godzilla was able to claim that energy for himself, absorbing both the radiation and elements of her power, which contributed to his evolved pink form seen later in the film. This moment highlights that Godzilla's actions are not random or driven by anger, but are calculated and tied to his role as the guardian of balance. Every move he makes serves a larger purpose, even when it appears destructive on the surface. It also reinforces the idea that future battles in the MonsterVerse could become more strategic, especially if Titans like Rodan are brought back to fight alongside him. A coordinated alliance between Godzilla, Kong, Rodan, and Shimo would not only raise the stakes but also create a new level of teamwork in tactical combat, expanding the scale and depth of future films in the franchise. One of the most important aspects of Godzilla x Kong, the New Empire, is Godzilla's evolution from his usual blue atomic energy to a more powerful pink form. This transformation is not random, but the result of him absorbing massive amounts of energy, including the DNA and radiation from Tiamat. This is not the first time Godzilla has evolved in the MonsterVerse. In earlier events, particularly when Mothra sacrificed herself, Godzilla absorbed her energy to achieve a stronger state, and in a similar way, he absorbs Tiamat's power to reach an even higher level. This evolution is necessary because Godzilla is fully aware of the threat posed by the Scar King and Shimo. The ancient history revealed by the Hollow Earth Iwi tribe confirms that Godzilla has faced this danger before and understands that he needs significantly more power to defeat it. By absorbing Tiamat's energy, Godzilla increases his capacity to hold and generate energy far beyond his normal limits, with Monarch noting that his evolved state can contain up to 20 times more energy than before. Without this massive increase in power, it is unlikely that Godzilla would have been able to stand against Shimo, especially while she was under the Scar King's control. Although Tiamat's death may seem harsh, it ultimately serves a greater purpose, allowing Godzilla to prepare for the larger battle and protect the world from the Scar King's rise. The film then delivers several memorable scenes that highlight both action and character. Kong's opening sequence in the Hollow Earth, where he survives against hostile creatures using intelligence and traps, sets the tone for his journey and emphasizes both his strength and loneliness. His interaction with Zuko, including the unexpected moment where he uses him during a fight, adds a mix of humor and intensity that captures the spirit of classic monster films. Meanwhile, Godzilla's battle in Rome reinforces his role as the guardian of balance, showing that he will not hesitate to eliminate any threat to maintain order. The film also introduces new creatures like the drowned viper, adding to the sense of scale and danger within the Hollow Earth, even if these encounters are brief. Overall, the film balances spectacle with key character moments, giving Kong a more emotional and central arc while still providing powerful scenes for Godzilla. While the human storyline remains less impactful, the Titans once again dominate the film, delivering both action and memorable moments that define the MonsterVerse experience. Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire marks a shift in the MonsterVerse by narrowing its human cast and focusing more heavily on Kong's storyline. While previous films like Godzilla, King of the Monsters and Godzilla vs. Kong featured a larger group of human characters, this installment brings back only a few key returning figures, including Rebecca Hall as Dr. Eileen Andrews, Brian Tyree Henry as Bernie, and Kaylee Hottle as Jia. Notably absent is Millie Bobby Brown, who played Madison Russell, a central human character in the previous two films. Madison had strong ties to Godzilla's story, especially in King of the Monsters, where she played a major role in the events surrounding the Titans, and she continued as a key perspective character in Godzilla vs. Kong. However, with the New Empire shifting its focus more toward Kong and the Hollow Earth, her character was no longer essential to the direction of the story. Director Adam Wingard explained that Madison's arc was effectively completed in the previous film, and the creative decision was made to streamline the human cast rather than expand it further. By reducing the number of human perspectives, the film allows more time to be spent on Titan-driven storytelling, particularly Kong's emotional journey and the introduction of new elements like the Scar King and the Hollow Earth civilization. This approach also gave more prominence to characters like Dr. Andrews and Jia, whose connection to the Iwi tribe and the Titans became central to the narrative. Interestingly, the film does not provide any in-story explanation for Madison's absence, leaving her character completely unaddressed. While this may feel like a gap, it also leaves room for future stories to bring her back in new ways if needed. Her storyline remains open, giving the franchise flexibility to reintroduce her in a different context, whether through Monarch, Titan research, or another major event. Overall, the decision to exclude Millie Bobby Brown allowed Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire to simplify its human narrative and place greater emphasis on Kong's development and the larger Titan conflict. While some fans may miss her presence, the film benefits from a more focused approach, even if it comes at the cost of continuity with earlier character arcs. Far from the surface, Kong moves through the Hollow Earth as a lone ruler with no tribe, only routines built on instinct. He hunts, tracks, and tests the boundaries of a landscape that behaves like a living labyrinth. Even when he wins brutal encounters against predatory creatures, the victories feel practical rather than triumphant, like a soldier surviving one more day. Kong's power doesn't protect him from basic problems. A painful tooth infection makes eating difficult, turning survival into a slow grind. It's not just a wound scene, it quietly underlines the film's main emotional idea for Kong: strength without community still leaves him exposed. Above ground, Monarch scientists keep monitoring Titan activity, trying to prevent the world from sliding into another catastrophe. Their work isn't heroic glamour, it's damage control, tracking patterns, predicting disruptions, and trying to understand the fragile rules that appear to govern Titan behavior. Godzilla's presence on the surface is not framed as a friendly guardian in the human sense. He appears as a harsh balancing force, moving toward threats, erasing them, and leaving again. Early sequences emphasize that Godzilla doesn't negotiate with disorder, he deletes it. Monarch detects unusual signals, energy patterns that don't read like normal Titan movement. The danger isn't only physical, it's informational. Something is broadcasting, and the signal is strong enough to rattle instruments and trigger fear that a sealed threat may be waking up. Jiao begins seeing visions and drawing symbols that she doesn't fully explain in words, yet they appear connected to the same disturbance Monarch is tracking. This isn't treated as random supernatural flair, it's positioned like a locked door in the story. Jiao has the key, but not the language to describe the lock. The story shifts from mysterious readings to confirmed violence when a Hollow Earth facility is wiped out. The message is simple: whatever is down there isn't just moving, it's capable of decisive attacks, and it is no longer contained by distance. Dr. Eileen Andrews continues as a central Monarch figure, but now the mission needs different skills: field survival, Titan behavior knowledge, and rapid improvisation. Bernie adds the outsider's suspicion and lived experience around Monarch secrets. Trapper enters as a Titan veterinarian/adventurer type, more hands-on, less bureaucratic, and willing to make risky calls. Kong's tooth problem forces him toward human assistance. This isn't presented as Kong becoming dependent, it's depicted as Kong making a strategic choice. He's learned the humans can fix things he can't, and pain is the one motivator strong enough to make him cross boundaries. Kong's treatment isn't quiet medical realism, it's monsterverse engineering, quick, bold, and built for scale. The replacement tooth becomes a marker that Kong is entering a new phase, not just surviving, but preparing, whether he wants to or not, for a larger war. Kong leads the human team back down. As they travel, the Hollow Earth is portrayed less like a cave system and more like a separate world with its own gravity rules, ecosystems, and ancient pathways. The journey functions like a descent into buried history. A turning point arrives when Kong discovers signs of other apes, structures, traces of organized movement, and eventually living members of his species. The tone shifts: Kong's loneliness finally has an answer, but the answer is not comfort. Kong's first meaningful connection isn't to a proud equal, it's to a younger, scrappier ape navigating a brutal social order. Suko initially behaves like someone trained to obey a violent system. The relationship starts in tension and confusion, then slowly turns into uneasy cooperation. Kong's hope of finding family collides with the reality of tyranny. Many apes are enslaved or controlled, not united. The civilization is structured like a prison state, a hierarchy, enforcement, and submission as daily routine. Scar King is introduced not merely as a strong villain, but as a symbol of corrupted leadership, an ape who uses cruelty and spectacle to keep others in line. His control doesn't depend on loyalty, it depends on fear and punishment. Kong's challenge becomes impossible because Scar King has a weapon that changes the entire balance of power: Shimo, a gigantic titan with frost-based abilities. Scar King's rule is backed by something even other titans would hesitate to challenge. Kong can fight Scar King physically, and the film makes sure we understand Kong is not weak. But victory is stolen by Shimo's intervention, freezing attacks that injure Kong and force retreat. The message is strategic: this is not a duel, it's a war against a ruler with a living superweapon. While Kong gets pulled deeper into the Hollow Earth's politics, Godzilla's arc is preparation. He senses an approaching scale of danger and responds by absorbing radiation and increasing his energy reserves, behavior that reads like an apex creature stocking ammunition before battle. The expedition finds the Iwi, an ancient culture tied to Titan history. Jiao is recognized as connected to them, and the narrative reframes her visions as memory, inheritance, or a cross-species bond rather than random prophecy. The past is no longer myth, it becomes tactical information. The Iwi history describes an earlier conflict where Scar King's forces threatened the surface world. The story positions Godzilla and allies as the counterweight that stopped the invasion before. This makes the present-day disturbance feel like history repeating, with worse weapons on the board. The film reintroduces the idea that some titans don't merely destroy, they stabilize. Mothra's presence functions like a diplomatic override, something Godzilla recognizes, and something that can interrupt the reflexive alpha versus alpha conflict long enough for cooperation to happen. Back with the humans, Kong's injury becomes a new engineering challenge. Rather than patching him and hoping, Monarch equips him, most notably with a mechanized glove/brace that restores strength and gives Kong new striking capability. The story frames this as a response to Shimo. If the enemy escalates, Kong must escalate too. Kong travels to the surface and forces a confrontation. Godzilla arrives not as a teammate but as a territorial force that expects rivalry. Their clash is not fan service only, it expresses the franchise's core rule: alphas do not casually share space. When Mothra appears, the conflict shifts from competition to coordination. Godzilla's behavior changes because Mothra represents continuity with past balance, proof that this is not a Kong challenge, but a larger emergency requiring alignment. Scar King's push toward the surface triggers the final phase. The Hollow Earth threat becomes a global threat. Titans don't just threaten cities physically, they collapse systems, infrastructure, climate stability, and the psychological belief that humans can predict tomorrow. The most important tactical moment is not simply punching harder, it's removing Scar King's ability to command Shimo. Once that control mechanism is destroyed, Shimo is no longer an extension of tyranny. She becomes a free Titan, and the army stops being a single coordinated weapon. Scar King's defeat destroys the Empire's fear-based order. Kong's arc resolves not as Kong wins a fight, but as Kong inherits responsibility. He returns to the ape civilization not as a lonely survivor, but as a leader with a future and a people. After crisis resolution, Godzilla withdraws again, because that is his nature in this universe. He isn't crowned, he doesn't celebrate. He resets the board and leaves, like a force that exists to prevent extremes rather than build societies. Framing of Godzilla/Kong stopping Scar King and Shimo. Dr. Eileen Andrews is a monarch scientist whose role centers on keeping Titan-human contact from becoming catastrophic, while also protecting Jia and interpreting what Jia's connection might mean. Bernie continues as a conspiracy-minded ally who still ends up in the middle of real-world Titan events. Trapper functions as a field specialist, practical, bold, and useful when the problem becomes physical rather than theoretical. As listed by the numbers, the film shows domestic, $196,350,016, international, $372,371,691, worldwide, $568,721,707, with a listed production budget of $135 million and an opening weekend domestic gross of $80,006,561. Wikipedia summarizes the film's budget range as $135 to $150 million and reports worldwide box office around $571.8 million. Figures vary slightly by tracking date / Box Office Mojo shows a domestic gross of $196,350,016 and indicates the release tracking start as March 29, 2024. Metacritic lists a Metascore of 47 and a user score of 6.7. Rotten Tomatoes critics' consensus text on the page reads, "Come to Godzilla x Kong, the new empire for the sheer monster-mashing spectacle, and stay for that too, because the movie doesn't have much else to offer." The film is directed by Adam Wingard, and continues the MonsterVerse approach of combining large-scale CGI creature work with global location spectacle and a smaller set of returning human characters. The story starts by pushing you straight into Kong's routine in the Hollow Earth, not as a triumphant king but as a solitary survivor who has learned to treat every quiet moment as temporary. He hunts, he fights, and he thinks, using the terrain like a tool and turning the environment into traps when raw force alone would waste too much energy. Even when he wins, there's no celebration, only the next problem, and the film quietly makes his loneliness feel like a physical condition as real as hunger or injury. The first stretch of the narrative is basically Kong proving that intelligence is his real superpower. He watches patterns, waits, baits creatures into bad choices, and survives a world where almost everything wants to eat him. Very early, the movie adds a detail that changes the emotional temperature: Kong's infected tooth. It's not just an injury, because it takes away something fundamental, his ability to eat without pain, so even a Titan-sized champion is reduced to the frustration of being stuck with a problem he can't punch. The point lands hard: in a world where he has no family and no tribe, there is no one to help him with the small, critical things that keep a body functioning. That's the first time the film makes it clear that Kong's real enemy isn't simply another monster, it's the slow grind of isolation. On the surface, Monarch continues doing what Monarch always does in this universe, trying to turn chaos into data before chaos becomes a headline. Dr. Eileen Andrews and her people track activity, watch for shifts, and try to keep the two Alpha Titans from crossing paths in a way that would flatten cities just because of instinct and dominance. This part of the story works like a pressure gauge. Everything seems managed until the readings begin to change in a way that doesn't match normal Titan movement. Godzilla's early presence feels like a different kind of storyline running in parallel. He behaves less like a character making choices and more like a natural law enforcing itself. When he detects threats, he goes to them, ends them, and leaves. The film shows him striking in Rome and reasserting dominance before withdrawing to rest, as if he's correcting the planet's balance and then returning to dormancy until the next correction is required. The surface world's biggest misconception is thinking Godzilla protects humans the way a hero does. The movie leans into the idea that he protects order, and humans benefit only when their survival aligns with that order. Then the plot pivots when Monarch starts picking up unusual energy signals coming from below, something strong enough to disturb systems and trigger alarms, as if the hollow Earth itself is sending out a warning flare. These signals don't feel random, they feel patterned, intentional, and escalating. The film threads this disturbance directly into Jia, who begins experiencing visions and drawing symbols tied to something ancient. It's presented as a kind of inherited memory, not a convenient magical trick. Jia doesn't suddenly become powerful, she becomes sensitive to a message that was always there, waiting for the right person to receive it. Once the signals intensify, the movie stops teasing and shows consequences. A Monarch outpost in the hollow Earth is suddenly destroyed, which reframes the mystery as an active threat. This isn't a storm or a quake that can be explained away, this is violence with intent, the kind that suggests a force has been contained and is now pushing against the walls of that containment. From there, Andrews pulls together a response team that feels deliberately mismatched, because the situation demands different angles. Bernie brings paranoia and experience with Monarch cover-ups, Trapper brings fieldcraft and Titan handling confidence, and Andrews brings the scientific and emotional anchor that keeps the mission from collapsing into reckless spectacle. At the same time, Kong's tooth problem drives him toward the surface, and the movie makes this feel like a decision made under pressure rather than an act of dependence. Kong is proud, but pain is persuasive, and survival is practical. When he reaches human support and receives a mechanical tooth replacement, it's more than a repair scene, it symbolizes a new phase where Kong and humans are no longer just coexisting, they're collaborating, and that collaboration will become the only way Kong can face what's coming. With Kong stabilized, the team returns to the hollow Earth, and the narrative starts unfolding like a descent into buried history. The hollow Earth isn't portrayed as a single setting but as layers, zones with different ecosystems, threats, and ancient pathways that suggest old civilizations moved through this world long before Monarch built outposts. The deeper they go, the more the environment feels like it's swallowing them, and the film uses creature encounters and collapsing terrain not only as action beats but as reminders that the hollow Earth itself is hostile, even before the main villain is fully revealed. Kong's personal story turns sharply when he discovers he isn't alone, signs of other apes, structures, and eventually a hidden society that should feel like the answer to his loneliness but instead becomes the start of a new kind of nightmare. The first meaningful connection comes through Suko, a smaller ape whose behavior is shaped by fear and survival within a brutal system. Their dynamic is not warm and instant, it's cautious, tense, sometimes violent, and then gradually cooperative as both realize that trust, however limited, is more useful than constant conflict in a world ruled by stronger forces. The ape civilization is revealed as an empire, not a family, and the film paints it as a hierarchy built on control rather than community. Kong sees apes treated as tools, pushed into labor, kept obedient through intimidation, and the camera language makes the place feel less like a kingdom and more like a prison camp. That's when Scar King arrives in full, and the villain's power is expressed not only through strength but through the ease with which he humiliates others. He doesn't need to prove himself in fair combat, he needs to remind everyone that fairness is no longer part of the system. When Kong finally confronts Scar King, the film makes sure you understand the difference between strong and secure. Kong can fight him, and for moments it looks like Kong might overwhelm him, but Scar King reveals his true advantage: Shimo, an enormous ice titan controlled through a painful crystal mechanism. Shimo's freezing power changes the rules instantly. It isn't just damage, it's restraint, denial of movement, denial of momentum, denial of the very tools Kong relies on. Kong is injured, his arms severely compromised, and forced into retreat, and the retreat is important because it proves that courage alone won't win this war. The enemy has layers: a tyrant on top, an enslaved superweapon beneath him, and an entire army around them. While Kong is learning what he's up against, Godzilla's parallel storyline becomes clearer. He senses the scale of the coming threat and begins stockpiling power, absorbing radiation and pushing his body toward evolution. This power-up isn't framed as vanity or rage, it's framed as preparation, like a living reactor increasing capacity because it recognizes that the next fight won't be survivable at his current level. The film's basic setup, Kong encountering Scar King and Shimo and needing to unite with Godzilla, matches the official summary of the story's central conflict. The human expedition reaches the Iwi, and the movie shifts from immediate survival to myth turning into briefing. The Iwi recognize Jia as one of their own, and through visions and ritual connection, the film lays out the buried history. Long ago, the apes were protectors, then Scar King rose as a conqueror, attempted to push war to the surface, and triggered a massive conflict that required titans like Godzilla, and crucially Mothra, to end it by sealing the threat away. In this context, Jia's visions stop being abstract, they become a call to restore an old balance that was never meant to stay buried forever. Kong returns to the human team battered and defeated, and the response is not despair but escalation. Trapper and Monarch technology turn Kong's injury into an opportunity. The mechanical glove/brace is built to restore strength and deliver heavier strikes, effectively giving Kong a new toolset designed for an enemy who can freeze limbs and dominate with raw elemental force. This upgrade matters narratively because it shifts Kong from survivor searching for belonging into warrior choosing responsibility. He can't just run and hide. If Scar King reaches the surface with Shimo, there may not be a surface left worth returning to. Next comes the moment the franchise promises but refuses to treat as simple fan service. Kong deliberately seeks Godzilla, and Godzilla responds the way an alpha responds, by attacking first. Their clash in Egypt is huge, fast, and violent, and it carries a specific tension. Kong is trying to communicate urgency while Godzilla interprets Kong's appearance as challenge. The fight feels like two different philosophies colliding: Kong's growing sense of alliance and teamwork versus Godzilla's ancient, instinctive insistence that dominance must be settled before cooperation is even possible. The turning point arrives with Mothra's reappearance, and the film treats it like a language Godzilla understands instantly. Mothra's presence reframes Kong as not simply a rival but a necessary part of the solution, and it also signals that the conflict is repeating an ancient pattern, one that previously required multiple titans to resolve. With Mothra acting as a stabilizing force, Godzilla and Kong's relationship finally shifts from collision to coordination, not because they become friends, but because the situation becomes too large for pride. As Scar King moves to break through with his forces, the battle expands into a full-scale Titan war that spills toward the surface world. The threat isn't just the villain, it's the cascade effect. If the hollow earth is breached and Shimo is unleashed, the world above becomes terrain, not home. In the climax, the story's real tactical objective becomes clear. The key isn't simply beating Shimo, it's breaking Scar King's control over Shimo. Once the control crystal is destroyed, the entire power structure collapses, because Scar King's authority was never moral or earned, it was enforced through domination of something even more terrifying than he is. With Shimo freed, the final confrontation becomes a coordinated takedown rather than a messy brawl. Kong and Godzilla combine force and timing, and Scar King's defeat lands as the collapse of a regime, not just the fall of a fighter. The aftermath is deliberately split. Godzilla returns to his role as balance keeper and withdraws, because his story is cyclical. Threat arises, threat is neutralized, equilibrium restored, while Kong's story moves forward. Kong returns to the ape civilization not as an outsider begging for belonging, but as a leader who has earned authority through protection rather than cruelty, and the ending emphasizes that he is no longer alone. Outside the narrative itself, the film's financial and reception picture reinforces what kind of movie it is, a spectacle first entry that audiences showed up for even when critics were divided. The numbers lists a domestic total of $196,350,016, international total of $372,371,691, and worldwide total of $568,721,707, with a production budget listed at $135 million and an opening weekend domestic gross of $80,006,561. Metacritic's aggregated reception shows a Metascore of 47 and a user score of 6.7, which fits the pattern of mixed critics, more favorable general audience. Rotten Tomatoes critics' consensus phrase captures that same argument in one line by emphasizing monster spectacle over everything else. As the hollow Earth signal keeps building, the surface world begins to feel like it's standing on top of a drum that someone is slowly tightening. Monarch's instruments don't just read activity, they read intention, like a coded knock from a sealed room, and the fear isn't only that something dangerous is moving, but that something intelligent is coordinating. Gia's visions intensify in parallel, and the film treats them like a relay. She isn't inventing images, she's receiving them, and the closer the signal gets to breaking through, the more her drawings and instincts start forming a consistent language of symbols, pathways, and warnings that Monarch can't decode with computers alone. Godzilla's response escalates from patrol and punish into deliberate preparation, and you can feel the logic even when no human character can explain it perfectly. He doesn't behave like a creature randomly angry at the world, he behaves like a ruler of the surface biosphere who recognizes that a past enemy may be returning with a weapon strong enough to challenge the old balance. When he begins seeking concentrated radiation and absorbing energy at scale, the movie frames it as a biological arms race. Godzilla is upgrading his own capacity to store and discharge power because he expects the coming fight to be longer, harsher, and less forgiving than the quick dominance displays he's used to. This is the narrative reason his body shifts into a brighter, more intense energy state later, a visual sign that standard Godzilla is no longer sufficient for what's approaching. Kong's arc runs on a different engine, not power accumulation, but the search for belonging that turns into the burden of leadership. After being injured by Shimo's freezing attack and humiliated by the reality that brute strength won't break a tyrant backed by an enslaved superweapon, Kong's choices become sharper and more adult. He stops acting like a lone champion wandering a hostile wilderness and starts acting like someone forced to accept that his decisions will determine whether others remain enslaved. Zuko becomes critical here, not because he's powerful, but because he shows what Scar King's system produces, smaller apes trained to survive by submitting, betraying, and obeying, until even their idea of normal is shaped by fear. Kong's gradual shift toward protecting Zuko, even when it costs him, quietly signals what kind of ruler he might become, the opposite of Scar King, someone who leads by defense rather than domination. When the human team reaches the surviving Iwi community, the story stops being only a present-day emergency and becomes a continuation of a very old war. The Iwi don't describe the past as legends for entertainment, they describe it like a record of trauma, where the wrong ruler rose among the apes, tried to push conquest into the surface world, and triggered a Titan-level conflict that required extraordinary intervention to end. That's where the narrative places Mothra's importance. She is not introduced as a random cameo or a nostalgic reference, but as an essential stabilizer who once helped seal the threat away and can now serve as the recognized signal that convinces Godzilla and Kong to stop treating each other as the main problem. In other words, Mothra is the bridge that turns two alphas from rivals into a coalition, because she represents an older, proven balance that predates modern Monarch and predates the current crisis. Back with Monarch's team, Kong's injuries force humans to do what they do best in the monsterverse, respond to impossible biology with equally impossible engineering. The mechanical glove/brace isn't just a cool accessory, it is the film's way of making Kong battle-ready against an opponent who can disable limbs and lock down movement with freezing force. It also functions as a psychological turning point. Once Kong accepts the upgrade, he's no longer simply reacting to the hollow Earth's cruelty, he's choosing to return to it with intention. This is when Kong's mission stops being personal survival and becomes strategic. Scar King cannot be allowed to bring Shimo and an ape army to the surface, because that would turn human civilization into collateral terrain in a Titan feud. The confrontation in Egypt becomes one of the story's most important miscommunication sequences. Kong arrives needing alliance, while Godzilla arrives expecting challenge. Their fight is huge, destructive, and instinct-driven, and it reminds you that Titan diplomacy is not conversation, it's posture, dominance, and the threat of annihilation. Kong's urgency can't be translated into Godzilla's worldview until something appears that Godzilla already understands as meaningful: Mothra. Once she enters the moment, the entire logic shifts. Godzilla doesn't become gentle, and Kong doesn't become submissive, but the conflict finally has a shared context. It's no longer two kings arguing over territory, it's two kings recognizing that a sealed war is reopening. From there, the story accelerates into coalition warfare, Godzilla as overwhelming force, Kong as adaptive strategist, and Mothra as the stabilizing presence that keeps the alliance from collapsing under instinct. Scar King's surface push reframes him as more than a villain with an army. He becomes an existential threat because he is trying to convert two worlds into one empire. Shimo's presence is what makes this truly catastrophic, because her frost power is portrayed as a city killer and an ecosystem disruptor, the kind of Titan ability that doesn't simply smash buildings but changes the environment into something unlivable. The movie's central plot premise is exactly this: Kong encounters Scar King and must unite with Godzilla to stop Scar King and Shimo from invading the surface. In the final battle, the most important tactical idea is not who hits harder, but who controls whom. Scar King's dominance depends on his ability to command Shimo through a control mechanism, turning her into forced labor at Titan scale. Once that control is broken, the entire war flips direction, because Shimo stops being a weapon aimed at the heroes and becomes a free force that no longer serves the tyrant. That reversal is why Scar King's defeat feels inevitable after the control breaks. His rule was never built on loyalty or legitimacy, only on enforced fear, and once fear loses its leash, the empire collapses. The ending then gives each Titan a different kind of closure. Godzilla returns to his role as balance keeper and withdraws, while Kong gains something he's lacked the entire film: community, and steps into leadership among apes who finally have a chance to live without the whip and without Shimo's forced obedience hanging over them. If you step back and look at the movie's real message, it's not so philosophy, it's the MonsterVerse preferred theme expressed loudly: power without balance turns into tyranny, and strength without purpose turns into loneliness. Kong's journey is the emotional spine because he changes the most. He moves from isolated survival to responsibility for others, while Godzilla represents continuity, the ancient constant that keeps the world from tipping too far into chaos. That's also why many responses to the film focus on spectacle. The movie is designed to deliver monster action first, with character emotion mainly carried through Kong's expressions and choices rather than through long human dialogue scenes. Rotten Tomatoes critics' consensus captures that emphasis bluntly by telling viewers they're essentially there for the monster spectacle, because the film doesn't prioritize much beyond it. On the performance and reception side, the numbers reflect a movie that audiences treated like an event even as critics stayed mixed. Metacritic lists a Metascore of 47 with a user score of 6.7, which fits the pattern of critics' lukewarm, audiences more forgiving, especially for franchises where viewers often show up primarily for action scale and Titan moments rather than layered drama. Financially, the numbers lists a domestic total of $196,350,016, international total of $372,371,691, and worldwide total of $568,721,707, with a listed production budget of $135 million and an opening weekend domestic gross of $80,006,561, which indicates strong early demand and a healthy global run for this kind of effects-heavy blockbuster. Box Office Mojo also shows the same domestic gross figure, $196,350,016, and places the release tracking start at March 29, 2024.